President Trump confessed on TV to the thing he's being investigated for, and on top of that, he managed to drag Vice President Mike Pence into it. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. First, let's just remember the central issue at question here. Trump had a phone call with the president of Ukraine, during which he dangled hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid, and in return, asked him to dig up dirt on a political opponent, Joe Biden, by literally telling the president of Ukraine, "I would like you to do us a favor." That is extortion and a flagrant abuse of power. And as we said before, you never want to do Trump a favor, because then he'll befriend you and then humiliate you on national television. I mean, yesterday, all the president of Finland did was sit next to him in the Oval Office while Trump descended into madness. And at one point, when Trump tried to get close to him by putting a hand on his leg, the president of Finland literally had to swat him away.
Finland is the happiest country in the world.
Finland is a happy country.
What can you learn? What can you learn?
That is like when you get in a fight with your wife on the drive to a dinner party, and then when you sit down, you try to act like it didn't happen, but she wants you to know she hasn't forgotten. Isn't that right, honey? Get your hand off of me. We will talk about this when we get home. In fact, during that whole press conference, the president of Finland was turning to the cameras and pleading for help like Mr. Roper when Mrs. Roper gets horny. Now, as you'll recall, Trump has lashed out at accusations that he did anything wrong on the call with the president of Ukraine, insisting there was no quid pro quo and that he did not pressure Ukraine to investigate Biden.
There was no quid pro quo. There was nothing. It was a perfect conversation.
There was absolutely no pressure put on him. There was no quid pro quo at all.
There was no pressure, no nothing. There was no pressure. That was not pressure. I know when I give pressure, and that was not pressure.
What does that mean, I know when I give pressure? Trump's only defense is, I know when I commit a crime, and that was not a crime. Like if the cops knocked on your door and said, "Did you beat a guy to death with a tire iron, chop up his body with a chainsaw, and throw his limbs into the river?" And you said, "I didn't chop him up. I know when I chop guys up." You might also remember that in addition to the actual notes from the call, we also have the whistleblower's complaint, which has been deemed urgent and credible, and alleged that the president pressured Ukrainian President Zelensky to initiate or continue an investigation into the activities of former Vice President Joseph Biden and his son Hunter Biden. And even though we've literally seen the call notes, and Trump has basically admitted to doing what the whistleblower alleges, he also keeps calling the whistleblower a liar and a spy. In fact, he even claimed that once House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saw the actual notes from the call, she changed her mind on impeachment.
The whistleblower was so dishonest. The whistleblower said terrible things about the call, and if you remember at the beginning, it was quid pro quo. That's all you heard about. And I think he said 7 or 8 times, quid pro. In other words, you're going to do that or we're not going to give you money. You're going to do this or we're not going to. Nancy Pelosi called for essentially impeachment. Let's impeach the president before she saw the transcript. So when she saw that, I heard she went crazy. She said, "We can't impeach him of this conversation. That's a great conversation."
I guarantee you she did not say that. At this point, he's just writing fan fiction about Nancy Pelosi now. Nancy Pelosi walked into her office, and she read the transcript and said, "We can't impeach him. We can't impeach him on this conversation. That's a great conversation." And then she gazed out the window and had the same thought that had nagged her for years. Why hadn't she married someone as handsome as Donald Trump? Now again, all of this is confirmed by the call notes themselves. We already have all the evidence. It's all there in plain sight. But yesterday, a reporter tried to ask Trump a simple question. If you weren't pressuring the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, then what were you asking him to do? And instead of answering that question, Trump got mad and told him to talk to the president of Finland instead.
Go ahead, ask a question.
But the question, sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Listen, you ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked you, which
Did
was,
you hear
what
me?
did you want
Did you
him to
hear me?
Yes,
Ask
sir.
him a question.
I will, but
I've given you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
He's like a teacher telling his class to listen to his guest speaker on career day. Look, I know Kyle's dad is boring because he's an accountant, but you gotta ask him a question. Kyle's right there. He's super upset about this. So to recap, Trump said there was no pressure, no quid pro quo. The whistleblower was wrong, and he did not ask the president of Ukraine to investigate Biden. And then this morning, he told reporters on the White House lawn that he wanted Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden.
What exactly did you hope Zelensky would do about the Biden after his phone call? Exactly.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens. I would say that President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens.
So he just confessed on TV. After 2 weeks of lying and spinning, he just admitted to the crime he's accused of. He basically just blew the whistle on himself. He should have a whistle just around his neck at all times. Ukraine should investigate Joe Biden. Putin should find Hillary's emails. Oh, blow the whistle. I'm gonna release a sex tape. So Trump has once again just outed himself as a criminal, but as we all know, when Trump implodes, he doesn't just implode on his own. He takes everyone else in the White House down with him. Trump's like a tornado. You don't know when or where it's gonna touch down, but when it does, it's gonna suck up some cows, a few houses, and maybe even a scarecrow. And we're seeing the same thing happen in the Ukraine scandal that sparked the impeachment inquiry. For example, you might remember last week when out of nowhere, Trump dragged Vice President Mike Pence into his mess by telling the press that Pence had also spoken with the president of Ukraine and that they should look at Pence's phone calls too.
I think you should ask for VP Pence's conversation because he had a couple of conversations also. I could save you a lot of time. They were all perfect. Nothing was mentioned of any import other than congratulations. But the word is that they're going to ask for the first phone conversation. You can have it anytime you need it. And also Mike Pence's conversations, which were, I think, one or two of them. They were perfect.
And let me just say, with all sincerity, no one deserves to be dragged down by Donald Trump more than Mike Pence. Although, Pence... this guy. Pence should have seen this coming when Trump tried to give him a Godfather kiss at the RNC in 2016. Come here, Fredo. Come here, Fredo. And then, after Trump dragged Pence into his mess, you'll never guess what happened. The Washington Post did some reporting, and it turns out Pence also had a phone call with the president of Ukraine where he discussed cutting off the hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid that Trump had dangled as part of his quid pro quo.
The Washington Post reports President Trump repeatedly involved Vice President Pence in his plan to exert pressure on the new president of Ukraine. Trump used the vice president to inform the Ukrainian leader that hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. aid was still being withheld.
Well, Mike Pence, you can't be surprised that the asshole you pledged your loyalty to is now throwing you under the bus. This isn't a case of the carriage turning back into a pumpkin because he's always been a pumpkin. And on top of that, White House sources are clearly leaking to the Washington Post that Pence was involved so they can dirty him up too. I love imagining how this is all playing out. Pence coming home from a hard day's work and trying to blend in with the background during meetings, flicking on the lights and the house is empty except for Trump sitting there in the corner with his back turned. Oh. Hello, Mike. Weren't expecting me, were you? Oh, you're in trouble, Mike. It's all here in this note. I know what you did last summer because I did it too. In fact, if you read this Washington Post article, you can almost see line by line Pence's aides trying to claim he's innocent and White House aides claiming he's guilty. Pence's aides, for example, say he didn't know anything about Trump's efforts to pressure Ukraine's president to investigate Biden. Officials close to Pence insist he was unaware of Trump's efforts to press Zelensky for damaging information about Biden and his son. All right, I'm sorry, but that's just insane. Of course Pence knew about it. You think Trump kept this a secret? The guy can't keep his mouth shut about anything. He probably ran over to Pence's office immediately to tell him about it, just like a kid who figured out how to type boobs on a calculator. Mike, look. Do you see, Mike? Mike. Do you see? So obviously Pence knew what was going on, just like Trump's Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who was on this call, and his attorney, General Bill Barr, who was named repeatedly during the call. So now, because they're all implicated and because they have no defense, they're just threatening to block the impeachment inquiry altogether. Trump's calling it a treasonous coup, and Rudy Giuliani is actually threatening to sue Congress for following the impeachment procedure laid out by the founders in the Constitution. And if you're wondering just how serious this lawsuit is, here's a real text message exchange Rudy had with a reporter for The Atlantic who posted it to Twitter on Tuesday. What are you planning to do next? Looking at a jawsuit to end lawless action. Who are you going to sue? The Swamp. Trump v. the Swamp. How do you sue the Swamp? In federal court. You know it's bad when jawsuit isn't even the stupidest part of the text message. Seriously, why are these guys so bad at spelling? Yesterday, Trump spelled moat with 2 O's. Rudy spelled lawsuit, jawsuit. In fact, if you showed up at court and told the judge you wanted to file a jawsuit against impeachment, they would call it moot and then dismiss it like the president of Finland. Again, what happened here is very simple. The president extorted a foreign country to meddle in the 2020 election. His staff tried to cover it up, and then they got caught. Now he's admitting to it. Several of his most senior aides are involved, and they're threatening to obstruct the impeachment inquiry. And most importantly, the vice president is now involved, too. Trump is turning on Pence, and all Pence can say is,
Don't be rude.
this has been A Closer Look.